Hello there! Welcome back to my 5-part series on Linocut Basics. In our last video, we talked about block printing tools, so if you haven't watched that already, go check it out. But in today's video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to transfer your image onto your Linocut. This is a really important step if you wanted to do more detailed, non-free-handed art pieces, as freestyling and drawing directly on the block can be difficult due to the mirror image. I will be sharing my own personal favorite method, but I'm also going to be trying another method that you can use to explore what works best for you. For the purposes of this series, I'm planning to use the same drawing on two of the more popular carving materials, Speedy Carve, which is also known as Soft Cut, and Battleship Gray Linoleum. Soft Carve or Speedy Cut is this pink rubbery material that is good for less detail, but it is perfect for some fun little stamps. And you can actually just use ink pads when stamping with these. And Battleship Gray Linoleum can come mounted or unmounted. I prefer the unmounted personally, in remounting it myself. And it's a tougher, more dry material. Before I start the transferring process, I like to put a little bit of ink onto my Battleship Gray Linoleum. This is Liquitex acrylic ink, and you can find it at any craft store. Now, we don't need to do it for the Speedy Carve, but I do like to do it for the Battleship Gray. And this helps the transfer stick to the block as well as dry, because it has something to dry onto. So I just like to add a few drops and quickly bring in a brush. Typically I have a brush ready, but now if you don't have any ink, that's totally cool. You can go without it, but just be aware that the transfer might not dry, and you will likely have to go back over it with Sharpie. Once the ink is dry, you're ready to transfer your image. But first, let's draw. For this video, I felt like linocutting an old drawing of a bear that I drew a while back that never really went anywhere. I'm going to use a certain level of detail that is easy to show off the differences in the carving materials and will provide different textures for my next video in the series. I'm drawing on an app called Procreate on my iPad, which is $13 in the App Store. It's so worth it. I'm not sponsored, but I highly recommend it if you love to draw and have an iOS device. Of course, this method works with any drawing application, whether it be Photoshop, Clip Studio Paint, Ibis Paint, etc., but it can also be done with photos and clip art, but it does require printing, so a digital art piece is necessary. Feel free to skip if you don't have a digital drawing application or a printer. Before printing, I do like to go ahead and lower my drawing's opacity to 60% so that we don't overload the page with too much ink. After I'm done drawing in a simple black outline, I'm ready to print it to apply it to my layout. I print my pieces on the shiny backing of label or sticker paper, as it is perfect to hold the ink and apply. If you work in an office, there's a chance you can actually ask to take some of this home for free. And I had a pretty substantial stockpile until I ran out, and I've ended up just buying a bunch of shipping labels. You don't have to get this many. I was planning on using the labels themselves as stickers, but basically all we need is this shiny backing paper. I use an inkjet printer, and mine is an Epson ET2800, and if you have a laser printer, I'm not quite sure if this method will work out for you, because the ink, from what I've seen, sits on top of the label paper, so it is easier to apply to the Linocut. You can always try it out, but I will warn you that I am not guaranteeing that it will work if you have a laser printer. So I ran into a little bit of an issue, which is actually a good teaching moment. It's important to make sure that your drawing will line up with your lino. Sometimes it can be hard to gauge. A lot of it comes down to trial and error. Luckily, my bear is gonna fit, but the star will not, so I might just redraw it up in the corner. But for now, let's transfer. So turn it over and place it down onto the linoleum. Try your best to keep it stable and not let it slide around, as it'll definitely ruin the transfer if you do. Press down on the label paper very gently, but be careful about what motion you use. It can smear if you slide your hands too much, so I like to just gently put a certain amount of pressure down on every spot, kind of lightly tapping down, as well as going over it multiple times. That way, all the ink gets fully transferred and you have a complete block. Now you can see that I am lifting up the corners of the page. This is just to make sure that I can see that it's fully transferred, and you can do this as many times as you'd like. One other little mistake that I made in this demonstration, but it's not super bad. I did use a little bit too much ink. As you can see, it's this very rich color, and typically you don't really want it to be this dark or this thick of a layer. Typically you only want to do a few drops, and it'll be something more like this where you can see the actual battleship gray behind it. So now we're gonna do the same on the soft cut block. It's a little bit different because the material is so much more spongy. There's a chance that this method, the ink kind of soaks in a little bit, and you'll see what I mean once it is revealed. But for now, I'm just trying to line it up perfectly. It's a little bit harder to see. And so now I'm doing the same thing. Now, because of the way that the soft cut block is, like I said, it'll kind of soak up more of that ink. It is a little bit harder to determine how hard to press and how gentle to be. I ended up actually smudging this block a little bit myself, but I usually typically work with Battleship Gray. That's why this method works better for me. But the traditional method that I will be showing in the next part is perfect for soft cut. But yeah, so I'm just very lightly tapping and revealing, and as you can see, the ink kind of smudged a little bit because of the material of the soft cut. It's not gonna sit as well, but it still reveals a pretty good drawing, and if there are any parts that you need to go over with Sharpie, you can totally do so. So yeah, here is just the difference between the soft cut, which is a little bit more smeared, and the Battleship Gray linoleum, which is a little bit more clear to visualize. So the next method is the graphite method, which is perfect for traditional artwork. You want to draw or trace a picture in pencil, and I recommend using a very soft pencil like a 4B or 6B pencil. I'm personally using a charcoal pencil in this video, which is very beneficial. You'll see how successful that is in a minute. But go ahead and just outline that drawing or use a drawing that you have already made. I chose to do this bear again just for consistency's sake, and that way we can show off the different methods of transferring with the same image, and it's very clear. So now that we have our drawing, we're going to do the exact same thing where we flip the graphite side down onto the block and make sure that it lines up properly. One cool thing about the pencil is that if you slide it around, it's not gonna ruin the artwork or the block. But once you start burnishing it, like I'm doing here, which is just taking another pencil and rubbing it along the back, making sure to go over the whole entire drawing with a good level of pressure, but don't rip through the paper. While we're doing the burnishing, it'll make sure to hold it down and don't slide it, because then it could transfer weird if it is slid around. But just keep that hand pressure, move around a little bit, and it should work out perfectly. Once you feel like you've burnished the entire thing, go ahead and just take it off. And as you can see, it's very clear. So now we're actually just gonna do the exact same thing. I didn't want to redraw it. Sometimes the graphite will hold up well enough that you don't have to redraw or re-sketch the drawing. Just keep burnishing that same exact drawing onto the Battleship Gray, and it should work just as well. The thing about the Battleship Gray is because it's more of a smooth texture and a little bit of a more firm texture, it may not be as clear or as sharp as it would be on the soft cut, because it's more sticking to the outside of the linoleum than actually kind of going into the linoleum. And that's just because the two textures are completely different. So with that, that's two different methods to transfer your image onto your carving spaces. You were able to get some use out of this. In the next videos in this series, we will be getting into the carving portion of the process, which is my favorite. So I'll be sharing some tips and tricks, so be sure to keep an eye out for that video. Thank you!